Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Welcome back to the channel. Not only yourselves, but myself as well. The entire community, welcome back to the channel. I am Seer Daredevil, in case you don't know who I am. And after taking some time away from content creating, I have decided to return once again. For those who are a little unfamiliar with me, I have done mostly TEW stuff, or Total Extreme Wrestling that is, for a few years now, minus a break from before, and then a break that I've taken recently now. I'm not going to get into a lot of specifics behind that stuff, because a lot of it's personal stuff that I'd rather not get into, but I have decided that it's time to return to doing content creating again. Now, it's not going to be a full-blown, full-time kind of return, especially not right off the bat. I'm not going to be returning to Twitch. I'm not going to be returning to Twitter. Legitimately, the only thing I'm going to be returning to right now is YouTube. And the series I will be going over here in just a moment will be the only thing I will be currently doing right now. I'm not going to be trying to do multiple series right off the bat. There may be a second or third series introduced in the future, but for the time being, just the one series that we're going to be handling. Especially because this one series is going to take a little bit. You see, it's going to be TEW 2020, and as you see on your screen, is going to be revolving around the Monday Night War. But this series is a little different. This series is a what-if scenario. The series that I am probably best known for, among anyone who has followed my content ever since I've created it, was a series where I started in WCW in December, that is, of 1997, right after the Montreal Screwjob, and I ran WCW for a little over a year. It was a pretty popular series on my channel, got a lot of views, all that kind of stuff. So I decided that if I was going to return, I was going to return to the basics. I was going to return to something I was familiar with. I was going to return to the Monday Night War, one of my favorite eras in wrestling history. But I was going to do things a little different. You see, in that series, we made up a reason why Hulk Hogan was not with the company anymore. I don't even remember what the reason was at this point. Kayfabe reason-wise, it was because I didn't want to book him. Because I've never liked Hulk Hogan, and I didn't want to book him. And so when I was trying to come up with an idea for my return, I got to think about it. And I was like, wouldn't it be interesting if there was a Monday Night War that happened, Monday Night War series that happened, or where WCW never employed Hulk Hogan, where Hulk Hogan never left the WWF to go to WCW. Wouldn't that be interesting, is what I thought to myself. So that's going to be the point of this series. In 1993, Hulk Hogan, instead of leaving for the WCW, decides to stay with the WWF. And from that, various things happened. Various things that I'll explain more as time goes on, but I'm going to cover kind of brief synopsis of stuff here in this video. But essentially, Hulk Hogan doesn't leave the WWF. At the same time, Brutus Beefcake doesn't leave the WWF. The Nasty Boys don't leave the WWF. A lot of Hogan's guys stay in WWF, although Jimmy Hart does leave eventually, but there's a different reason behind that. So, this is a universe in which Hulk Hogan doesn't leave the WWF. Essentially, this means that WCW is a far down the ladder distant second come the fall of 95, which is where the series is going to start. Because this is the Monday Night War, so of course we're going to be starting this the very first week of the Monday Night War in September of 1995 with the very first episode of Monday Nitro. That is where we're going to be starting things off, which, by the way, if you couldn't tell already, I will be playing as WCW in this. So, in the fall of 95, WCW is farther down the ladder than they were in real life. In fact, at this point, in this alternate universe, this wasn't even going to be considered a Monday Night War, because this is a company who has a lot of money behind them, but not much popularity, who's trying to throw a TV deal on air just to try to get some sort of competition behind them. In a sense, it's, for those who are familiar with it, in a sense, it's like in 2010 when Impact randomly had their Impact Wrestling on Monday nights to try to compete with Raw. Only it didn't last that long. Well, this is going to last a little bit longer. But it was kind of that same scenario where Impact wasn't really anywhere near as close of a competitor with the WWF, but they just tried to do it anyway. So that's essentially what this is going to be. But in order to get to the present and future of that point, we have to touch on the past a little bit. So this is where we're going to go ahead and go over a little bit of the synopsis of the company. So, WWF, tag team title scene. Going from June of 93. As you see there, kind of a little bit of a jumbled up mess there, but I'll explain it here. So, out of WrestleMania 9, the Money Inc. had the tag titles. Rick and Scott Steiner won the belts at a house show and then dropped them back the next night to Money Inc. And then at King of the Ring 93, the Steiners won the belts back. Steiners held them up until SummerSlam 93 when the Nasty Boys won the belts. Nasty Boys held them until the Royal Rumble 94 when the Quebecers won the belts. The Quebecers won the tag team championships at Royal Rumble 94 and held the belts until WrestleMania when they dropped them to the Nasty Boys once again. Now, as you'll see, the Nasty Boys are definitely still in the title picture at this point because, again, Hogan's still there. Hogan has some creative control in the WWF when he decided to stay, so he's making sure his boys are getting pushed. The Nasty Boys drop the tag titles to the Head Shrinkers, who then drop them to Hulk Hogan and Brutus Beefcake for a little bit because Hogan decided, hey, I want to make sure that Beefcake's getting over too, so I'm going to help him getting over by winning the tag titles. That lasts for a few weeks until the Quebecers win the belts back. Quebecers drop them to the Nasty Boys at SummerSlam 94, and then at the Royal Rumble of 1995, the Smoking Guns win the belts. And Smoking Guns then drop them to Owen Hart and Yokozuna, who are the current champions at WrestleMania 11. So the 95 portion of the tag team title picture for WWF remained the same. But as you saw, the Nasty Boys were a little more featured in there. But some of the other teams were featured too. The Head Shrinkers won the belts at one point. The Quebecers are two-time champs. So some of the other teams were getting featured a little bit too. We move on to the Intercontinental title picture. The women's, by the way, stayed the same. The women's none of this got affected really at all. Intercontinental title picture, out of WrestleMania 9. Shawn Michaels is the champ. Dropped it to Marty Jannetty for a little bit like he did in real life, who dropped it back to Shawn. Shawn drops it to Razor. Razor holds it up until WrestleMania 10, where he drops it to Diesel. Diesel then holds the Intercontinental Championship throughout most of the summer. He holds it from WrestleMania up until SummerSlam. SummerSlam, he drops the Intercontinental Championship to, you guessed it, Hulk Hogan's best friend in the world, Brutus Beefcake. Brutus Beefcake then drops the Intercontinental Championship to Rick Martel at Rumble 95 because Martel is also kind of another one of the older guys who, are getting over and all of that stuff. Martel drops it to Razor Ramon at WrestleMania 11, and then Shawn wins it back in July of 95 and is the current champion at the start of this save. And then we get to the world title. So, obviously, with this scenario, in real life, Hogan refused to drop the title to Bret, dropped it to Yokozuna, and then left. That's what happened in real life. In this universe, however, Hulk Hogan held on to the belt until SummerSlam of 93. Bret didn't get a chance to get that title back at that point. Hogan held on to it until SummerSlam 93, where he dropped it to Yokozuna. Yokozuna, once again, WWF champion. And this time, it was kind of a big deal because it was a major pay-per-view, SummerSlam 93, where the heel won the top championship in the main event. There was reasoning behind this, though, because they wanted to build this up as a big storyline that lasted pretty much the entire year. Because you had Hogan win the belt at WrestleMania. You had Yokozuna win the belt at Survivor Series. So obviously, a third contest was going to have to happen between the two of them. And that happened at Survivor Series 93, which ended up being a pretty well hyped up pay-per-view. It ended up getting a lot more buys than the real life one did. And in the main event, Hulk Hogan defeated Yokozuna to win the WWF Championship back. Now, in order to explain how the next part happens, I need to reveal what else happens at that time. Royal Rumble 1994, the Rumble winner in real life was Bret Hart and Lex Luger. However, in this world, it ended up being Bret Hart by himself, which we will show here in a second, but I don't want to spoil the 95 winner. So Bret Hart wins the Royal Rumble in 1984. Hogan says, no, I'm not dropping the belt to him. I'm going to go over at WrestleMania 10. Vince essentially has some balls on him and says, I don't care. I want to make sure Bret gets the title back. I feel like it's deserving for him to get the title back. So Hogan gets it worked out that he's going to use some creative control to get himself supposedly injured at the start of February of 94. Storyline wise, it was because Bam Bam Bigelow, who he had wanted to feud with for the WWF Championship and actually main event WrestleMania with, attacked him and laid him out and left him unable to defend the title at WrestleMania. So there ended up being a 4-man tournament at WrestleMania 10 for the WWF Championship. Bret Hart versus Owen Hart, and Lex Luger versus Yokozuna. Yoko beats Luger, Bret beats Owen, which is obviously a change from real life. And in the main event of WrestleMania 10, at a rematch from the previous year's WrestleMania, Bret Hart beats Yokozuna to become the WWF champion once again. So Bret's now a 2-time champion. Holds it for most of 94. Hogan's busy feuding with Bam Bam. Doesn't necessarily want the title back. Then, as we get to SummerSlam 94, they realize they have to have a big money match. They want to have a big money match to keep their momentum going, because the WWF is getting a lot more momentum than they did in real life because they have Hulk Hogan there. And so they have a lot more momentum going at this point. Hogan's main enemy in the summer of 94, Bam Bam Bigelow, just recently left the WWF to go elsewhere. We'll get into that reasoning in a little bit. So Hogan was like, well, fine. Let's do it at SummerSlam. Let's have me win the belt from Bret at SummerSlam. Bret's not exactly thrilled about it. In fact, Bret hates the idea. But Vince assures him, listen, it's fine. It'll work out in the end. Just drop the title to him. You'll still be in the title picture. So forth. So Bret drops the title to Hulk Hogan at SummerSlam 94. Hogan then basically refuses to work with Bret from that point on. Because in that SummerSlam 94 match, Bret made Hogan look good, like Bret always does with his opponents, but he also made him look bad. He also made Hogan look like he had no idea what the hell he was doing in a wrestling ring. Bret got chastised for it backstage, and because of that got sent down the ladder a little bit. He was still in some main event pictures, but he was kind of more of a main eventer outside of the title picture kind of role, which he wasn't thrilled about. Meanwhile, at this point, Hogan, Beefcake, and the Nasty Boys, who, as you saw with the Intercontinental and Tag title picture, have continued to get some attention, have clearly had their friendship continue to grow. But along those lines, they've picked up a few other people who have kind of joined their little group. People that you would consider a clique of sorts. Shawn Michaels, Diesel, Razor Ramon all kind of start hanging out with Hogan and his buddies more. And they all start to seem to get along a lot more. And suddenly it seems like there's this super group forming in WWF that these are the top guys. These are the guys of the future. These are the ones who are going to get that attention. And if you're not one of those guys, good luck to you. So at this point, that's why Bam Bam leaves. That's why Lex Luger leaves. And that's why some other various people leave. Hogan has the title at SummerSlam 94. Doesn't even defend the title at Rumble 95 because he's not doing that, brother. And he goes into WrestleMania 11 where he drops the title to Diesel. And Diesel is the WWF champion in the year of 95. Basically kind of similar to real life, but only this time the WWF is still getting a lot more attention because Hogan's still around. Because it's still, the wrestling world's not at the point yet where they're sick of Hogan and his happy babyface way. The WWF is getting the same popularity boost that WCW did when Hogan went to WCW. But, by the way, Diesel won the title at WrestleMania 11 because, of course, he also won the Royal Rumble in 95. King of the Ring wise, though, King of the Ring 94 winner was Razor Ramon. 95 winner was Brutus Beefcake. Because, again, he's making sure his boys get over. So that's what's happening in the WWF side of things. It's clear that there's this super group forming. And you're kind of just left there where you're at. The roster looks mostly the same. There's not really a whole lot of difference with the roster other than, Brian Knobbs still being there and, all that, and Hogan still being there and all that stuff. I guess Jimmy Hart is still there. My bad. I thought Jimmy Hart left, but I forgot I changed it back. So Jimmy Hart's still there. All that kind of stuff. So you're seeing that happening. But like I said, Luger's gone, Bam Bam's gone, and other things happened. So then we jump into WCW. So WCW in their history, we're going to go over the TV title first. We're going to go way up from the bottom to the top. So TV title picture is pretty much similar to how it was in real life, with the big exception being that at Slammiversary night, Slammiversary? Wow, I can't believe I just said that. At Slamboree 1995, Alex Wright actually surprisingly shocked the world by beating Arn Anderson for the television championship. Not only did he do that, but then at Bash of the Beach 95, he actually retained the title against Arn in a rematch, thanks to Arn getting disqualified because of Horseman interference, but I'll get to that in a little bit. So Alex Wright is a TV champion heading into the start of the save. United States Championship picture, though, is going to look different, and we'll explain why. So, the United States Champion picture essentially is mostly the same up until Fall Brawl 94. Fall Brawl 94 in this, well, kind of around that time. So, in real life, Steamboat had to drop the title because he got injured. In this world, though, Steamboat did get injured, still had to drop the title, but he held it until up until Fall Brawl 94 when he vacated the title because of injury. He couldn't defend it. So there ended up being a match between Jim Duggan and Steve Austin Jim Duggan wins. So Jim Duggan is the United States champion at that point. Duggan then goes on to Starrcade 94, where he drops the title to Big Bubba. Big Bubba then goes on to Slamboree of 95, when he drops it to Steve Austin once again. Now, you may be asking yourself or me, hey Daredevil, why is Steve Austin the United States champion at this point? Well, in this universe, Hogan wasn't there keeping Austin from getting a title shot at the world title. He wasn't there keeping guys like Steve Austin down, and he wasn't there corrupting the mind of Eric Bischoff. And so when Steve Austin got injured, when he got his bicep injury, which is why he didn't have the title for a little while there as well, Eric Bischoff never fixed him his pink slip. He never fired Steve Austin from WCW because he knew that he needed to keep guys like Steve Austin to keep WCW afloat, because he didn't have Hogan. He didn't have a lot of this big names and these popularity and all that stuff. He didn't have that, so he had to keep what he could. So he kept Steve Austin on. He never fired him. And in this world, Steve Austin is the United States champion at the start of the save. Now, regarding Steve Austin being the United States champion, there's something we'll have to talk about, but we'll get to that in a second. Tag team title-wise, mostly the same. Pretty Wonderful and Stars and Stripes traded the belts back and forth towards the end of 94. Harlem Heat won the belts in Starrcade of 94 from the Stars and Stripes, which is Marcus Bagwell and the Patriot. Steven Regal and Bobby Eaton, the Blue Bloods, actually won the belts at Uncensored 94, or Uncensored 95, that is, sorry, from Harlem Heat, and then Harlem Heat won the belts back at Slamboree 95. So right now, the tag team title picture is featuring Harlem Heat and the Blue Bloods still feuding, and so forth. However, as I mentioned with Austin, there's a thing that we have to go over, because in this universe, the Hollywood Blondes were still a thing at this point, because Austin didn't leave. Austin wasn't fired, that is, from WCW. So the Hollywood Blondes were still kind of a thing at this point. And at the same time, in this world, the Four Horsemen were a thing. They were reforming the Four Horsemen. And heading into Bash at the Beach in 1995, it was Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, and a young Chris Benoit as three members of the Four Horsemen. And they kept stating, Flair kept stating, that we would find out who the fourth horseman was at Bash at the Beach 95. That fourth horseman ended up being Brian Pillman, who in his tag team title match, teaming up with Austin to take on Harlem Heat, stabbed Austin in the back, not literally obviously, but turned on Austin, cost them the match, and left as a member of the Four Horsemen. So now, after Bash at the Beach, heading into those few months between Bash at the Beach and when the start of the save is, Austin and Pillman have been having a feud, because obvious reasons. So Pillman is a heel, Austin's a face. They've been feuding for the United States title. Harlem Heat are the tag champions. They're dealing with the Blue Bloods, and there's potentially some other teams coming about, as we'll go over with the storylines here in a little bit. Then we get to the world title. So the world title, in this sense, since Hogan never came about to win the title and basically hold it for most of this time, the world title, Vader won it in March of 93. He won it back from Sting. Sting only held it for a week. And then Vader won it and held it for pretty much the rest of December of 1993. He just held it that entire year. Flair managed to win it at Starrcade 93. And Flair held it up until July of 1994 when Sting won the belt at Bash of the Beach in 94. Sting holds it up until Starrcade 94. So at Starrcade 94, the main event is Sting defending the World Championship against Vader and against Ric Flair, which is kind of the big three that have been feuding for the world title this whole time. Then, thanks to a debuting Bam Bam Bigelow, Vader wins the world title at Starrcade 94. WCW tried to do the same thing that WWF did a year before by having a monster heel end a major pay-per-view with the World Championship. It didn't quite go over as well. Not that it was a bad thing. It didn't blow up on them, but it just didn't gain them that popularity push that the WWF did. Because again, they didn't have Hogan. Anyway, so then at that point, heading into 1985, the big feud around the world title was Sting versus Vader and Bam Bam Bigelow. Sting needed a partner. Along came Randy Savage. And in a four-way match at Uncensored 95, Randy Savage wins the world title. So now Randy Savage is the world champion. And Vader, Bam Bam, Sting are all still trying to feud for that title. Eventually, Savage gets kind of taken out of that storyline because Ric Flair comes back. He was gone for a little while. Comes back and says, I want the world title again. So we're getting Flair versus Sting, or Flair versus Savage, that is. Sting then brings in Lex Luger to team up with him against Vader and Bam Bam Bigelow throughout most of the summer. So Luger made his debut in WCW way before he did in real life. But that's because he left the WWF way before he did in real life, because he didn't want to deal with the BS that was happening there. He didn't want to deal with everybody holding him down at that point. So then Bash at the Beach happens, the same Bash at the Beach in which Brian Pillman turned his back on Steve Austin, and Brian Pillman then helps, so Pillman turned on Steve Austin in the tag title match. But he didn't announce he was a Four Horsemen until the main event, when he came out and cost Randy Savage the world title, helping Ric Flair win the world championship. And at the end of Bash of the Beach 95, we had the Four Horsemen celebrating with Ric Flair being the world champion once again. Even though Arn Anderson couldn't win the TV title back, they were still celebrating with that. So the Four Horsemen heading into the fall of 95 have Ric Flair as the world champion. They have Arn Anderson, who's the enforcer of the group, and then they have Chris Benoit and Brian Pillman, who are big future stars for them. And that's kind of where we head into this whole thing. So, storyline-wise, starting off here in September of 95, we have the storyline for the tag team title picture, in which the Blue Bloods are still there, Harlem Heat is still there, and then there's another team who's going to be showing up, which you can obviously see there on screen, but it's what it is. I'm not going to go over the second one on here yet, because I'm going to be going over that when we continue on, or here after this a little bit. But Four Horsemen storyline is happening, as I mentioned. At this point, Sting and Luger have transitioned from dealing with Bam Bam and Vader to now dealing with the Four Horsemen. So now it's kind of a little bit of a storyline heading into Fall Brawl 95. We've got the Four Horsemen, and then we've also got on the other side, we've got Sting, Steve Austin, and Lex Luger. Obviously, War Games are about. So we'll have to see if Sting's side ends up getting a fourth member for War Games. We'll have to see how that works. We'll have to see how that plays out, that is. Meanwhile, and this also happened. I forgot to mention that part too, but it wasn't just Brian Pillman that cost Randy Savage the world title at Bash of the Beach. It was also Bam Bam Bigelow, who was paid off by Ric Flair to help cost him the world title. Pillman kind of provided the distraction for the referee, getting the referee distracted and all that stuff, and Bam Bam's the one that came out and put the beat down on Savage. So now Bam Bam and Randy Savage are having a feud heading into the fall of 95. You know, Bam Bam and Savage had recently had their feud issue kind of through the tag team feud there with Vader and Sting involved, but now they're kind of a solo one-on-one feud going on here. And there's also that. So the other kind of bigger name that's in WCW at this point, which is what is kind of based around these storyline here, is wait, why did that change? Or why did that happen? Alright, well, I don't know why that happened. That Savage isn't supposed to be in that. I don't know why that saved that like that, but that's who's supposed to be in it. So, also in this world, Cactus Jack McFoley doesn't end up leaving WCW. He ends up staying around because, again, Hogan's not here, not corrupting the backstage area. Foley decides he's going to stick around with WCW. Foley and Taskmaster get a shot at the tag team titles at in August of 95, and because Harlem Heat are just getting super lucky at this point, it's another stab in the back as the Taskmaster turns on Cactus Jack. And for those who are unfamiliar, Cactus Jack and the Taskmaster, formidable tag team, had history with each other in WCW. That happened in this as well. So this feud, Cactus Jack and the Taskmaster are going to be going at it. Cactus Jack decided to stay in WCW, and he's a face now, heading forward, dealing with the Taskmaster, and this supposed man set on destruction that the Taskmaster has been talking about over the last few weeks. So we'll have to see how that works out. And then in a more, I wouldn't say a more minor feud, but there is a feud about to start as well, featuring Alex Wright, the WCW television champion, and Diamond Dallas Page, who wants the television championship. And it's kind of been announced that there's going to be a TV title match at Fall Brawl. It got announced on a Saturday night, the previous Saturday night, like the Saturday night before this first Monday Nitro, that there's going to be a TV title match at Fall Brawl, where if Alex Wright wins, not only does he retain the TV title, but he gets a date with the Diamond Doll. So that's a kind of a big deal. It's a storyline that's been happening for a few weeks on Saturday night. So that's the idea behind this. So starting off in WCW here in 95, we're still considered second in the world for whatever reason. I don't know why, but it's considered a small company. As you see, that popularity is a lot lower than it would have been. In real life, they would probably be 65, 70 across the board. In this, they're a lot lower. They do have some popularity around the country, but obviously a lot more of it's in the Southeast. So right now they're considered a small size. They're getting close to medium size, but they're still considered a small size. Still have $25 million because, of course, they still have Turner Broadcasting. They still have Ted Turner behind them. So, of course, they're still going to have that money. But they have a lot less momentum, lower popularity, or lower prestige, all that stuff. Roster-wise, as I mentioned, some other people ended up coming here. Was sort of my major star here. So, like I said, Bam Bam Bigelow is here. Barry Windham is still in WCW at this point. He ends up staying in WCW for the time being. Cactus Jack is here still. I don't know why Dick Slater is considered a major star, but that's whatever. Another big name that stuck around in WCW at this point is Dustin Rhodes. In this universe, one of the worst matches and one of the worst ideas for a match in history, now I'm all of a sudden blanking on the name of it, but the match between Dustin Rhodes and the Blacktop Bully out on the highway never happens. Bischoff realizes that's a stupid idea. That's not going to happen. Because Bischoff gets a little more power before that point. It's not Kevin Sullivan who's booking things he's still the main booker, but he doesn't have as much say about that kind of stuff at this point. because Bischoff's kind of suddenly thrown into the picture a little bit more. And so that match doesn't end up happening. So therefore, Dustin Rhodes and the Blacktop Bully don't get fired by WCW because of them blading during the match and all that other stuff. That never happened. They did have a match, but it was just a normal wrestling match. They didn't have that match out there on all that stuff. So Dustin Rhodes is still in WCW. He's still working as a babyface, all that stuff. His father is color commentator, sometimes manages him, but not really too often, especially now at this point. Otherwise, some of the other names that are here, like I said, Blacktop Bully is here. Some of the other names that are here that weren't necessarily here before, trying to think here. James Mitchell has been brought in to WCW. Rumors are that he's bringing about a tag team that he is going to be managing. So we'll have to see what that happens with that heading forward. As well as the Steiner brothers being back in WCW at this point. They got recently brought back in a couple months before this, kind of in the summer of '95, and started kind of working their way through different people again, because again, they didn't want to go back to the WWF with what was going on there. So they came to WCW, and they're doing things now. Eventually going to find themselves in the tag title picture, I'm sure. But yeah. Patriot's still here. Vader's still here. All that kind of stuff. So that's kind of essentially what's happened with this start of this series. It's going to be interesting heading forward for sure, because there's a lot of different things that is going to be interesting to see how they play out. But I think it's going to go well. I think it's going to go really well. I know this video is long. If you're not familiar with my content stuff at all, I can tell you right now that the future videos for this series will not be this long. I'm usually pretty good about getting them trimmed down to about 20 to 30 minutes, if that. Essentially, with this series, we'll be going over. Every video will be the episode of Nitro, and then the pay-per-view. Saturday night, I will go over the results of if you guys want me to. Otherwise, Saturday nights, I will bring up a few things here and there, especially if they're related to storylines that are going to show up at the pay-per-view. But otherwise, I'm not going to do much on there, because most of what Saturday night is going to be is basically going to be getting people over. It's basically going to be, here's Vader squashing somebody. Here's this happening, with a few minor things happening here and there, kind of like with that TV title picture, or the TV title feud going on. But it's mostly going to be just a way to help get people over, and then maybe cover some storylines, but it's going to be like mostly bare bones stuff. Like, Savage might have a match on Saturday night, win, and then Bam Bam might attack him after the match or something like that. Like, it's going to be bare bones stuff. If it's anything significant, I'll bring it up. But most of everything's going to happen on Nitro and the pay-per-view, so that's what's going to be covered. So, essentially the idea of this is that starting with the first Monday in September, which, as in real life, happened then as well. So the first Monday in September here. Apologize. That's what happens when you don't talk this long for that long, or you tend to have your throat kind of do whatever. But anyway, so the first Monday in September, which actually coincidentally enough happens to be Labor Day, that will be when the first Nitro will be aired. Well, the first Nitro episode will be going up. It'll be, at this point, it'll go up every Monday. Will be the episode of Nitro, and then whenever we get to the pay-per-view, that video will go up on Sunday. So you'll get a video on Sundays whenever there's a pay-per-view happening, or if it's like a clash or something. If it's something basically, I'm going to be sticking to the video. Will be going up kind of similar to how the schedule in the game is. So every Monday you will for sure get an episode of this, and that'll be the episodes of Nitros. and then you'll get one on Sundays for the pay-per-views. And then if we do random shows throughout, like if we end up doing a random big show of Saturday night, maybe I'll do a Saturday episode of it. Or if we end up doing like a Clash of the Champions on a Thursday during the week, then maybe you'll get an episode of Thursday video of it. But essentially that's what's going to happen with this series, is you're going to see an episode based off of whenever the schedule in the game happens. So yeah, I hope that you guys are excited for that. I'm excited to not only provide you the content and to not only try to book this series, but also I'm excited to be back on YouTube. I'm excited to be doing all this again. As I said, it was, personal stuff that happened, but it definitely wasn't enjoyable being away from creating content, because I've always enjoyed creating content for others. And I've always said from day one, I've always said that if I know that anything I do can even provide even a few seconds of entertainment for anybody out there, and make things a little bit better for them on that day, provide some sort of humorous entertainment or something that maybe helps brighten their day just a little bit, then that's all I really want in life. I don't need, out of content creating, I'm not gonna be going crazy trying to get money. I don't want to try to gain all this ton of popularity. For me, it's just providing entertainment for anybody. And if it's only one person that ever watches my videos heading forward, then so be it. That's fine. But I have been CR Daredevil, and you guys will now see me on Labor Day, or September 6th, 2021, for the first official episode of this series.